welcome. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which I meet, which for me is the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. But also like to welcome everybody here today. And this is a fairly topical area and we're hoping for lots of conversations. So we've got a fantastic moderator in Christina Hoopner and then three amazing panelists in Christine Slade, Leanne Noy and Kevin Kelly. But we would like really good conversation happening through the chat up until there's a time for a Q&A. So this is not only about the opportunities, but perhaps some of the considerations that we need to think around the topic of artificial intelligence and portfolios. So my name's Alison Miller. Apologies, there's no video. My internet's misbehaving and it's a bit dodgy and I'd rather you hear me than see me. I get to facilitate ePortfolios Australia along with our organising committee. And so we're going to hear some global perspectives. As I said, please contribute, query, question, and then later in the session we'll ask for other ideas because I'd like to see this be a series of webinars around this topic. So we would like, what is it that your needs are or interest areas are? So thank you. That gives us a nice summary of what we're going to get through today. As I mentioned, I get to facilitate in line with a group of people we call the ePortfolios Australia Organising Committee. We're a professional network that supports ePortfolio practice. We have the name Australia because we adopted that about 15 years ago, but we're actually quite well and truly beyond that in terms of the representation of people within our community. And so we hope to support professional development, research activities, and the sharing of resources and ideas. So Christina, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure, thank you. We also have a number of representatives of ABLE in the room today, and ABLE is the Association for Authentic, Experiential and Evidence-Based Learning, the international professional development organization for ePortfolio practitioners and researchers. So doing very similar things to ePortfolios Australia, with a focus initially on more the North American continent, but we've branched out and it is also very international these days. And one of the groups that you might be most aware of that what ABLE is doing is the Digital Ethics in ePortfolios Task Force, in which Christine Slade, Kevin Kelly, Teresa Conifrey, and I, for example, are members of. And then the third partner in our group for this webinar series is ePortfolio Ireland. I'm pretty sure we don't have anybody on today's call from them because it is rather late over there, or very early morning in Ireland. But we'd still like to acknowledge that group. And that ePortfolio Ireland is the professional learning network for ePortfolio practitioners and researchers based on the Green Isle. So we are all three organizations happy to offer this webinar series to you. And yes, they've been very busy participating and working on the Eden conference. Over to you, Alison.
So as I mentioned before, we've got the three panelists. We won't spend too much time introducing them. We'll let them introduce themselves and let them have that time to share their experience with them. So I'm pleased to welcome Associate Professor Christine Slade, Associate Professor Leanne Noy, and Dr. Kevin Kelly. But initially, Christine, can we hand over the baton to you?
Hi, everybody. It's so good to have you here discussing this topic. I'm from the University of Queensland. I am an associate professor in higher education. And one of the reasons I'm in this, well, two reasons why I'm in this topic is that I've been advocating and researching and practicing ePortfolios since, I don't know, at least 10 years, maybe 12. And also I'm the lead of assessment at my university in this institute, and therefore GenAI has passed my desk. It's actually not really passed, it's sort of stopped at my desk. At least for the last 6 months. So a topic close to my heart is joining the portfolio, because process is an important part of GenAI and portfolios are right in there. So this is a very interesting topic to me. So my responsibility is to give you a very quick overview of what's happening with artificial intelligence. And I'm no expert, I'm like you, I'm in the same boat. But this was an interesting diagram I found recently when I did a sort of a scan of the bigger literature and reports for a talk that I was giving. And I noticed there that natural language processing, which is the ChatGPTs, FORs and all the others, only fit into that one little category there on that picture. So in our minds, this is a very big picture. The one that's most prominent at the moment is just that one, but there's plenty of other things happening in the other space. And of course, what they do is interpret, manipulate, and comprehend human language. So the text space, I'm sure we've all had a try. If you haven't, I encourage you to have a go. And the most popular one, which came out late November, was, of course, ChatGPT 3, which we now have 4. Thanks, Christina. Now, this is my experience. Sometimes this journey since probably the beginning of the year for us, because it came right at the beginning of our semester, so we had to make some very quick decisions. It felt like this never-ending maze. And it's still this point, we don't have one simple answer. It's quite complex. You know, we're all sectors, schools, higher education. Others are looking for answers of how to fix some issues we have, but it's this big maze. And then another time I had this picture when I was driving and the storm, and I can't see the whole picture. So we're sort of in this confused liminality space at the moment, still all searching around for what we need. But the last picture I thought was great is that we are all collaborating to the one goal. So wherever you are in the education space, we all are trying to find the same answers. And it's been really lovely to have that collaboration, which Alison's been encouraging for today. Thanks, Christina. Another observation of mine is, so in the very beginning, we had some very excited people, we had some very anxious people, and we had some pessimistic people really thinking that, you know, this was almost doomsday. So to try and help people get over the emotional impact of this Gen AI accessibility is still there, but it's, I think, subsided a little. But we definitely have extremes of what people feel about it. I've seen then people are getting more confident. We've got some very, very early adopters who are taking on with gusto, and then we've got the unsure and the confused. And now I guess where we're sitting after about 7 months is we have the dedicated. So we have little demonstrations of what they're doing, the enthusiastic. But I think we also have people who just don't want to know about it, and people who don't want to know what their assessment's going to be like if they pop it into Gen AI. And then just another quick snippet is this artificial intelligence literacy. So, you know, we have all these literacies, but this one is helpful because we have a lot of portfolio users or people who we're going to work with that don't know much, and we're going to have to actually help them through using portfolios to know and understand how the AI works, how to use it, and then, of course, how to evaluate whether it's telling the right thing, doing the right thing. So that critical analysis, and then being able to create their own artifacts. So it's quite a long process, as literacies are, and we'll need training and practice to be able to do that. And lastly, this was something I found very helpful. So the slides will be available, but it's around the large suite of ethical considerations. And it's a checklist that someone put up in a blog about when should I use this tools, this platform, you know, when am I breaching privacy? What's it telling me? The bias that it might have? Does it make sense? And, you know, is it transparent? And so it's a really good little image of what are the real big questions that we should be asking. And I think that's the last one. So Leanne, we're over to you.
Kia ora, Christine. Thank you so much for kicking our discussion and our panel off today. And I forgot to introduce myself. Kia ora, I'm Christina Hoppner, work at Catalyst IT in Te Whanganui, Atara, Wellington, Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I'm attempting to moderate today, trying to keep all the threads together. And since we have so many people on the organizing team, which is fantastic and also shows the interest, you'll also hear from others in the chat, and Alison is posting links for you so that you can click them directly. We will also be making the slides available so that you have then all those links available. And of course, also the ultimate question, yes, there will be a recording publicly available, which will be shared once we have the transcript corrected, so that all the acronyms that we are using today are, and all the names and institutions are correct. But that was kind of all the administrative things after we started with the session now. So I'd very much like to hand over to Associate Professor Leanne Noh from La Trobe University, also in Australia, like Christine, just on a different coastline. And I'm really happy to have Leanne on today's webinar, because we had collaborated on an earlier ePortfolio project on the field guide to ePortfolios. And so Leanne has been in the portfolio space for many, many years, also in leadership roles. And so it's fantastic to hear from her now what is happening at La Trobe in Melbourne in that area. So please go ahead, Leanne.
Thank you so much, Christina, for the warm welcome acknowledgement as well. So yes, I am based in Melbourne, down south in Australia, and it's really cold down here. We're pretty much known for having 4 seasons in one day. Sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's not. Sunshine's happening as well. So in the ePortfolio space, I've been in that space for quite a while, probably 15 years at the moment. My current role in university at La Trobe, I'm looking at the quality of teaching and learning. I'm back into the discipline. My background is in computing and IT and cybersecurity. So I'm in the School of Computing Engineering and Mathematical Sciences in that space. So I'm looking at quality of teaching and learning with the online programs, and looking at innovative assessment and feedback opportunities to look at the way that we design our courses as well. Now, what I'm going to speak about, I'm going to speak about 3 current topics. So one's going to be on changing role of educators and institutions. The second one's going to be on improving accessibility and equity in education. And the third one will be on customizing learning and assessments, and augment it through the lens of, what are potential benefits, risk and challenges, and also looking ahead across those 3 areas at the moment. So the first one, looking at changing role of educators and institutions, and similar to what Christina had mentioned, everyone's kind of new in this space. Everyone's learning and everyone's collaborating together. AI has been around since forever, all right? It's been around, but the generative AI part, yes, it's been around as well, but obviously it's taken momentum over the last 8 months or so since it was introduced in November last year. It's, gone off everywhere. Everyone's, looking at it at the moment. But at the moment, with institutions and educators, I think, look, I've got 3 points down there in terms of benefits, challenges, and looking ahead. But I can't help think, the old saying of, good teaching is good teaching at the end of the day as well. We may have a lot of technologies, all these progress in technologies that's kind of knocking at our door at the moment. But at the end of the day, as a role as an educator, we got to think about, we as educators, we're not just delivering one-way information to our students, but there's a whole heap of emphasis of being more engaging, being more creative. We're more facilitators and guiders, and looking at ways that we can engage with our students. And good teaching is good teaching at the end of the day as well. And we've had discussions within our institution, and I've also had discussions elsewhere as well. The concerns around job securities, will my jobs, as an educator still be in place in the next, XYZ years? Yes, it will be. It will just be modified down the track. Because at the moment, everyone that I speak to, an educator, whether you're a professional administrator within a university, everyone's kind of pessimistic, but then they're also very optimistic as well. They're so collaborative. Everybody's networking collaborative, not just internally, but here as proof, globally and externally as well. Everybody wants to help each other to see what's happening in this space. So that self-initiative, looking at things that's innovative, they actually want to improve, you know, their assessment, their feedback, and their teaching practices as well. So job security concerns, no, I don't think there is, you know, it's the role, your responsibilities will change down the track, and for the better at the end of the day, to get on top of what kind of practices there are in place. And I believe, you know, based on this as well, there's certainly more opportunities for cross-institutional and global collaboration down the track, heaps of that. And also we need to think about, it's not just us as educators and students. Students are critical to our aspect, but also looking at what is actually helping in what's happening in the communities and industry as well. And Christina mentioned our collaboration with our work integrated learning work. The key thing is knowing and that connection and partnerships with industries. They're also going through this change, same thing as, you know, the education institutions as well. So we need to partner up and be aware of what's happening outside externally as well. And as educators within an institution, yes, there will be ethical AI frameworks being discussed at the moment. And as an institution, we need to think about, you know, what is our stance, you know, in AI at the moment? What kind of stance are we looking at projecting? Are we looking at building professional literacy, academic literacy, trust, and a culture of trust and all of that? So we need to think about that going down the track in that space. And I think heaps more collaboration, not just locally, cross-institute, but look at global collaborations out there as well. Thanks, Christina. Next slide. In terms of accessibility and equity, I see that this is a great potential area. You know, it's not just looking at different cultures, different, you know, people with different spectrums as well. There's different areas in terms of language and also the way that we deliver learning in multi-modal modes as well. There's heaps of opportunities for that. And for example, for me, I'm happy to say, like, I'm dyslexic as well. And so it takes me 5 to 10 times longer than the average individual to actually write something. And I see opportunities for this with people with different, you know, skill sets, different spectrums, etc. Neurodiversity in that space where the languages, etc. There are opportunities to help put this on par in terms of that with different students and different learners and different cohorts as well. And definitely with learning being open across globally. However, having said that, there is a huge potential for risk and challenges. Is this a new digital divide? And I'll say this, and I've shared this with others as well. Last year, I had the opportunity to take, you know, a break from professional work for around almost 8 months to 9 months, no working at all, and I was able to work in the communities. And we all know that there's a digital divide. But when you're not working, you can see that the digital divide was just massive, course, and it was enhanced, you know, by obviously COVID going along. But now AI is coming in, you know, for the last, you know, since November. We have to be wary of the new digital divide that it's causing at the moment, and across globally, but also with institutions as well. Some institutions are more richer than others as well. They have access to a lot of resources. It's not just the people, but it's also looking at their technical infrastructure as well that they have in the institutions. So we need to be, so institutions do need to think about that as well. Certainly there are, you know, cultural and different context variances as well that we need to think about in that aspect. And obviously potential biases as well, the development of these generative AI and the variations that we have in that as well, because originally it was developed for business, a money-making scheme. It wasn't really for education. So I think the last few months, we're thinking about that at the moment in that space. Going down forward in terms of looking ahead, yes, there are definitely opportunities for institutions to look at the ethical and legal guidelines. We do need our legal counsel team involved in our community discussions going forward as well. And obviously that touches upon the academic integrity side of things in that space. Open source AI, you know, for education, addressing that at the moment. Certainly open source AI, I think at the moment, my institution at the moment and other institutions, we are looking for opportunities for that. Can we develop something that's kind of kept internal and safe within an institution for our students and staff members to use? Can we pay for subscription models for our staff members to use? Because at the moment, we have staff members paying for their own subscription models. So you're paying $20 US, you know, for I think version 4. Some students may not have that, you know, resources to pay for that. And is there an equity divide in that aspect as well? So we do need to look at that and obviously advocate for digital equity, literacy programs, not just for students, but for staff members going forward. Thank you, Christine. Next slide. And the big topic of learning and assessment, this is very close to my heart. I see this, you know, again, we had COVID, you know, pushing and transforming emergency teaching and learning across institutions, and this generative AI comes in next. We can't ignore it. It's definitely a beautiful opportunity for a great paradigm shift in education, or definitely for our senior executives in our institutions. Go, we need to put in more resources into this, like in terms of transforming or reimagining our assessments. And I'm a big supporter of looking at programmatic approach to assessment across a course-wide approach that's scaffolded, and e-portfolios pedagogy, process of learning and feedback and putting in self and peer evaluation towards evaluative judgment is all in there. And also, you know, looking at getting students the opportunity to curate professional capabilities, showcasing their learning, adding more authentic assessment. It's all in there as well. And that's something that's important that we could look at going forward. Definitely, you know, at the moment, no longer are the days where our learning for our learners is just kept within our formal institute, you know, formal learning process. Learning is everywhere. It's collective, it's distributed, it's everywhere. And this generative AI has this potential to do that. Yes, it does have a long way to go to get better, but it will get better. It will get better. We know that down the track. So there's definitely opportunities for that. And there will be probably more, there will be obviously more focus on individual and personalized opportunities for learning with feedback, whether they get real-time, continuous, and also self-direct. So it's going to be pervasive across our lives as well. But definitely there is opportunities for that. And I'm not going to go into too many details, but we know that academic integrity is rife. It's everywhere. Everyone's talking about that and looking at policies and procedures in place as well. And there are a range of, you know, vendors or technologies out there looking at detection plagiarism and all of that as well. But it's one of those things that we just have to be aware of as well when we go forward in that space. So I think that's it from me. Thanks, Christina.
Yeah, Leanne, thank you so much for your bird's eye view on the overarching topics that are coming up, which of course we started with Christine. And now we are crossing the oceans, the biggest ocean that we have in the world, and head over to Dr. Kevin Kelly, who is working at San Francisco State University in the United States. And he is going to be our last panelist for today. So please do get ready to ask your questions, because I do know that Kevin loves answering questions, and the other panelists as well. Kevin is not just working at San Francisco State University, he is also a board member of the ABLE board, and also a member of the ABLE task force, like Christine and me and Teresa, from the start in 2019. So he has lots of insight, especially also in regards to equity, inclusion, belonging, and diversity. And so I look very much forward to his short statement. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Christina, and hi, everyone. Just for context, Christine set us up by giving a global perspective, operationally defining generative artificial intelligence, and talking a little bit about how it makes us feel and act. Leanne shared institution level perspective, where we're starting to look at the issues that arise with respect to accessibility, equity, assessment, everything that starts with a vowel. And then my task, I've been charged with talking about this at the ground level. Christina mentioned bird's eye view for Leanne. Christine might be the weather balloon view way up high, and I am on the ground. And so on the next slide, you'll see that one of the first things that educators and students face in terms of the challenges are tied to those emotions that Christine mentioned earlier. Educators are torn between these two different ways of looking at the world. First, they want students to do their own work and to create original work. Again, echoing what Leanne said about academic honesty, academic integrity. At the same time, those educators want students to have access to artificial intelligence tools that support the learning process. And so we have some ways that we can create a balance. And as some people have suggested in the chat, exploring the artificial intelligence tools themselves is one way to go. And as you explore those tools, think of ways that students can use it to help them as learners without letting it do the learning for them. So when it comes down to it, we want to encourage students or learners that genuine intelligence is better than artificial intelligence. So on the next slide, you'll see that one of the first things that we think about when we are asking, how can artificial intelligence support digital literacy? Christine took it very literally and said, hey, let's create digital literacy related to using those AI tools specifically. But digital literacy skills have been mapped out for us by different authors like Jones and Hafner. And so the AI can be used to help students with things like creating coherent reading pathways or creating multimedia or exploring different online environments. And I'm really a fan of the approach, institutional approach that the University of Southern California took by suggesting that generative AI be considered a digital literacy tool for the students and learners there. And so they also recognize that some faculty will be on board with this idea and some won't. And so they have two categories: those faculty, those educators who embrace and enhance artificial intelligence, and those who discourage and detect it. And so in the workshops that I've been delivering around the United States virtually, I've been providing options for both so that people can choose the path that they prefer. So on the next slide, you can see on the positive side of the scale, if you're really interested in helping students gain skills with artificial intelligence, you could use it to engage them in critical thinking exercises, perhaps using ChatGPT or another chatbot to create questions that would encourage students to analyze maybe two contrasting points of view that were generated by an AI chatbot, or content itself. Again, some of the skills that Leanne hinted at earlier. But it's also, as some people have been saying in the chat, important to be thinking toward the future, the workforce considerations that students will have to think about. And so having those conversations with students about how AI is impacting the field and altering the workplace is another aspect of that digital literacy that they'll need to be considering. Even if you don't want them to use it to complete assignments, they still need to be prepared to enter the jobs of the future. And so on the next slide, you can see for those educators who don't want to use artificial intelligence and don't want students to use it either, ePortfolio practices are actually really powerful ways to exclude generative artificial intelligence from the process. When you ask students to create an authentic assessment, when you ask students to submit a piece of media instead of an essay, when you ask students to incorporate their real world connections, their lived experiences as part of the work, all those ways of generating what are typically considered typical ePortfolio works, or the reflections and planning activities that go around them, then it's very difficult for students to use artificial intelligence to generate the work. It's more used as a tool to support their learning process. On the next slide, you'll see I asked my students, I had a conversation in an online course called How to Learn with Your Mobile Device. And I asked them specifically, when is it okay to use artificial intelligence and when is it not? And so the original posts and replies included things like they really liked the fact that you could personalize your learning, get immediate feedback, correct your mistakes, adapt and customize as you go, use it as a writing aid. But in the responses and some of the original posts, some of the students were not happy about the fact that you couldn't invent new things through the artificial intelligence, that they questioned the quality and accuracy and level of bias of the information generated by the AI. They also, when they were thinking about feedback and using AI as a way to get that feedback, they said, we're paying the professors. We want the feedback from the people we're paying. So it was interesting to have my students really going to the point where you can see those last 4 bullets in the bottom right corner, that students didn't want to use AI to generate unoriginal work. They thought it was unfair to students who do submit original work. And they also felt that it could limit creativity, potential, maybe even promote laziness amongst learners. So the last slide I have, I think, no, I think that's it. So that brings us into that Q&A session that Christina mentioned, where we can maybe have a fuller conversation now that you've seen these different perspectives from the weather balloon, the bird, and the gecko on the ground.
Thank you very much for making that transition for us, Kevin. And yes, as you've nicely said, we have the different perspectives, from the global perspective, general perspective, to the perspective of the institution, as well as then also directly going into a course. And so I'd like to start with one question that Alison, I think, had put into the chat for all 3 of you, and that is, should institutions embed more AI literacy in their programs? Because I think that does fit on all of those 3 levels. So we have about 10 minutes for the Q&A now. So if anybody else wants to ask their questions, please do feel free to raise your hand or put it into the chat and be one of the first to do so. So we'll get to your question first then. But now that you've had a few seconds to think about, Christine, Leanne, or Kevin, who would like to provide an answer to should institutions embed more AI literacy? Christine, go ahead.
It's just been interesting in some of the reports. I think it's the UNESCO one. They list out the countries that have actually done quite extensive AI education in K to 12, so from kindergarten to 12. Australia wasn't listed, even though we're a member of this thing, but it was interesting talking to people in that sector, whether we're a little bit left behind in some ways, because it's going to be such an important tool. I think we need to seriously consider not waiting for people to get to university, and then even then it's selective. It's not for everyone at this stage. We do need to seriously consider that as a core skill for our children in different levels of schooling, plus in education. And of course, these literacies, they are intertwined, and that, but we've even been struggling with digital literacy, and I think COVID helped a bit, because we all had to go online. But there's a lot involved in a literacy. So yes, we do need to have explanation. We need to have practice. We need to see how it's relevant to what we're actually doing. And so I think it's a very important part of what we'll need to reconsider.
Leanne, you're nodding. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's 100% yes. If I can say 200%, I will say it. Definitely, we do need to look at that. At institutions, not just at higher education. And I agree with Christine, it needs to go down to primary school and high school levels. It's unfortunate that I think at the moment within Australia, I think most states have banned the use of generative AI. That's probably because the OpenAI doesn't actually recommend the use of their tool for under 18s at the moment. But hopefully that will change based on a commission. I think that's going to be open, and there's an invite for submissions to our AI and education use within our Australian government. But we definitely need to look at that. And I do believe that our digital literacy definition, capabilities, does need to incorporate AI literacy inside it. And we need to partner up with our industry, our professional institutions, our industry as well, because they're also grappling with that as well. I mean, most disciplines, most industry areas are already using that. And we want to be able to have our students, our graduates, have the skills and knowledge and experiences once they're outside, once they finish their university studies. But having said that, most students are working part-time casually at the moment as well. So we don't want to be left behind, not just for our students, but also for our educators as well. But having said that, not just our educators, we have professional staff members in institutions as part of their jobs, their HR, their administrative, whatever area they're in. Definitely we need to look into that and develop that and incorporate that. But from an educator's perspective, in terms of curriculum design, we do need to look at whether, because at the moment in our institution, we're thinking, do we look at redefining it and then contextualizing it to the disciplines and scaffolding that across a program? Or do we look at one particular subject and have that taught in a subject, etc.? But again, that's a kind of thinking that we're having at the moment, but it's definitely 200% yes, the answer we do need to look at.
So Kevin, what does it mean on the very practical level on the ground in the courses with your students? Do you think you are introducing a new literacy, or is it part of the already existing ones?
I'm doing both. So I actually created a module during the semester and introduced it as kind of a pop-up where I had students, because again, my course is how to learn with your mobile device. So I created a module, how to learn with artificial intelligence, and made them think about what it means to create prompts. I also had a slide in that presentation around the ethical considerations, that there are pros and cons. So Leanne brought up accessibility earlier. For students who might have learning disabilities, it can help them organize their thoughts and the way they structure their arguments after they've created what they intend to be the original set of ideas. So they're still creating the original work to kind of nod to some of the questions that are going in the chat, but they're getting help in terms of addressing things in a way that would support them in how instructors want to see things turned in. However, I also shared with them ways that they can use AI to become more digitally literate in other ways. Again, using that list of digital literacy skills for the 21st century as kind of the core set of skills that they're going to need, and how AI can support them in adopting those practices. But I do let them know that the downsides include the fact that it's a very biased set of information, that whatever they enter in there, it becomes part of this pool, and they're not signing a user agreement as they do with tools like Turnitin.com, which detects for plagiarism. It basically just becomes part of what that device will use to generate ideas for someone else down the road.
Thank you, Kevin. And as you can see in the chat, there are a few more elements to that ethical conversation, both in regards to who is entering the data, who's training the data, how are these people treated, and then also what to do out of it. Kevin, there is a follow-up question for you in the chat, but I'd like to go to another question from Penny first. Please do unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, Christina. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is, I just want to heartily express how much I think programmatic assessment's part of the big response to AI. But this is just a sort of a bit of an out of field question, perhaps more at the Gecko level, and particularly for mobile devices. Is AI going to be able to help us automatically collect data on our learning for our process? I'm not interested in surveillance, but for processing within the portfolio. So that collect stage of Mahara, can we can we be prompted to quickly respond or reflect to our experiences, or can AI, because that's part of the disincentive to use a portfolio is how much work it is to organize and to streamline and to, so it's sort of a bit like, partly like multimodal note taking. I don't know, something along those lines. Does anybody have any desires, future hopes for that?
Christine was smiling and agreeing with you earlier. Do you want to say something? I certainly put my recommendation into the chat, but I don't want to take away from the panelists' time.
I was just laughing because I just put something in the chat about being careful about what you put into a system, particularly around students, because, you know, I work a bit with schools, and the temptation could be to make your reports about a child, you know, to send out through one of the systems. But I've always been a bit nervous about where that data is going. And there's now a new button that you can turn off the history in chat, if you believe what they're saying. But it's interesting, it says that if you don't turn that off, it is actually being used to actually train the system and to be actually, you know, improve the system. But on the other hand, there's quite a lot of work already done in feedback systems, you know, tutoring systems, things that I'm imagining that commercial e-portfolio providers might be looking at. I mean, that's an interesting space for them. Could they add some more features into the portfolio? I mean, you know, it depends whether you like automated feedback, I guess. But for some, I think for staff and the time pressures that we have, considering something like automated feedback isn't a bad idea, as long as it's not the only thing the students get. So I think, you know, there's creative ways that we could use it in a portfolio system. If you're using Mahara, I guess it's open source, so you're relying a little bit more on somebody creating that, but that's not to say they won't. You know, you've got the opportunity then to think about how AI would work in that. You know, because AI is not just what we've seen, right? Leanne said it's all of these, so many different things. And I'm on the learning curve too of all the different types. I've seen just recently a list of all the different types of things that education's already got available that uses AI. And I think we've ignored some of those. So yes, there's always risks about things, but I'm looking forward to the benefits, I think, to improve student learning. And if we can outweigh the risk and mitigate those risks, I think it could be a very good thing to put into a system. But anyway, that's what I was sort of laughing about.
Maybe if I can tack on just a little bit.
Yes, sorry,
to
go
that.
on, Kevin.
No. I think you nailed it. But for Penny's question about incorporating AI functionality within ePortfolio context, you know, maybe it starts as not giving the answers like, hey, you have an A grade or a B grade, or maybe not even providing feedback directly, because it may get it wrong. We already know that that's one of the core criticisms of generative AI, is that it doesn't always get it right. But it could, for the educator, provide some prompts saying, hey, this work that was submitted looks like it could use this type of feedback, and provide some samples. Or I'm noticing this pattern across all 30 of your students. My class has 53 students. So it's difficult for me to see patterns, even though I'm reading all the essays, because I lose the forest for all the trees, right? And so having some assistance in saying this may be a pattern that shows either a gap, students aren't demonstrating these learning objectives the way you'd like, or it's demonstrating that almost all of the students in your class are demonstrating that objective, so you can be assured that you're on the right track with the strategies you're using in the class. So to me, that could be an interesting way to incorporate AI, is to detect patterns, to provide prompts that make the instructor think maybe differently about how to give feedback to students to help them grow.
So Kevin, can I just follow and ask you something about that then? what do you think about putting in students' work into one of those systems? Do we have the permission to do that?
So that's why I brought up earlier that it's not like turnitin.com. At least that's the tool that in the States that's often used for plagiarism detection. And that students specifically click a button, which they often don't read the statement that comes before clicking the button, but at least they've acknowledged that my work is going to go into a pool and it's going to be used to check for plagiarism for all other students for a period of around 10 years. And so the AI tools just gobble up whatever you type in there, whatever you copy and paste in there, and then it becomes part of this pool. And so there is no end user license agreement, there's no privacy statement, and it is, again, along with bias, one of the other criticisms of AI tools is that it's not protecting your information, and there's no citation. When you ask the AI for an answer, it won't tell you whose work it's drawing from to generate those ideas. It's just going out on the web, finding what it can and pulling it back in, and in some ways perpetuating the kind of
the model.
exactly.
But I mean, if I'm a teacher, could I, because we're having this debate, do I have the right to actually put in what a student submitted for an assessment task into one of those to even provide feedback? Because they haven't given permission.
I would say if it were me in my class, I would talk to my students first and have a conversation about it.
So you think that's enough to, I mean, it's just an interesting question because we don't know where the data's going.
Yeah, can I just add to that conversation? I mentioned, earlier, because at the moment, like just ChatGPT at the moment, it's not a supported system within our institution. We haven't gone in with our legal team, our cybersecurity team to vet the tool and look at that at the moment. So that's not, we shouldn't be putting student work in there at the moment. That's the general guidelines that we've got. And I think any discussions with that, we need our legal and counsel team on that. And I'll just mention just quickly on the same question as well with Penny. I think it's one of those things where I'm really big on having some kind of open source, and the universities, our institution, setting something up so we can train the actual tool, put in some parameters in there so it gets better. I think I mentioned something about standardization versus personalization. And I think the better that we train it, personalize it, whatever rubric, whatever parameters we put in there, I think that's for the better at the end of the day as well. But I think definitely there is an opportunity for ePortfolio platforms to incorporate AI into their systems for more personalized learning as well in the ePortfolio.
Thank you so much, Leanne, Christine, and also Kevin for those responses. Looking at the time, we are in a kind of start of that very lively conversation now, and unfortunately, we are almost out of time already for today's session. But what we wanted to make sure is that we continue this conversation, because it really is only the start in the portfolio world. To talk about AI, and Grail in Australia in particular has already done quite a bit around that, also learning analytics and portfolios and artificial intelligence. But in our community here in ePortfolios Australia, ePortfolio Ireland, and also the ABLE community, we are in the sense making face quite a bit, and therefore exploring things. And what we want to do with this webinar series is really make it so that it gives you the most benefit. Therefore, if you can please go to menti.com with the code that you see in the chat and also on screen, or use your mobile device and check the QR code, then please type in what you'd like to see, what interests you on that conversation. You can do that in a few minutes if you need a minute to think about, or want to kind of check with a friend on what you would like to propose, then, and that would be really fantastic to know, because we really want to make those sessions very relevant to you. So it can be all the way from very practical tools, which we will be looking at already in August in our first workshop on this topic, to more policy questions, ethical questions, learning designer questions, faculty questions, and the like. So please do let us know what interests you so that we can incorporate that into our program over the next several months to make sure that we stay in that conversation and we continue having those conversations. So on the screen here, you already see there will be an online workshop in August. We have not yet quite settled on the date, but as soon as that is available, we will announce it in all the different places where the 3 organizations are, in the newsletters, social media, and so on. And the idea really is to show a few of the tools that Dr. Megan Mice from Old Dominion University has explored herself over the last few months. And I believe Rift that I mentioned in the chat is one of those tools that doesn't give you the answers or doesn't give you feedback on, have you done this right, have you done this wrong, but that helps you reflect on what you have already said and therefore go deeper into reflection. And she also wants to make sure that you get some hands-on experience yourself, creating a chatbot and showing some of the easy ways of getting started, taking that fear away. Oh my gosh, this might be too difficult for me to do, and really look into, well, how can things be done? So that is coming in August. But before then, the ABLE annual meeting will actually take place from the 13th to the 14th of July online. And the 19th to the 21st of July will be in Vancouver in Canada. And this year's forum has the topic, ePortfolio Learning in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, Fostering Authentic Assessment Through Inclusive Pedagogies and Design Justice. So we'd love to have you attend that conference. The online sessions are catering 2 different time zones, and the sessions that are happening in Vancouver are very much workshop oriented, discussion oriented, so that people can really try things out on their own. There are more events coming, and so for the next one, I'll hand over to Alison.
So thank you, Christina, and also to all the panelists. I'll do another thank you later on, but it's been a fantastic session and great chat going on there. So yeah, we have our what we call our flagship event. We do lots of different things during the year, collaborating with interesting people like ABLE and ePortfolio Ireland, but other events. But our flagship one certainly is the 2-day forum. This year we're going to Darwin, which is pretty exciting. I know Bill's left, but he's from Charles Darwin University in Darwin. But we will be a hybrid, we'll be a dual delivery. So if you can join us in Darwin, fantastic. But if you still want to be part of it, come along as an e-participant. We did it last year out of Melbourne. It worked really well. We can improve obviously what we've done last year, but it is workable to run a highly interactive. So we have presentations, workshops, facilitated conversations, and lots of networking. So if you can't get to Darwin in October, please have a look at the link or the QR code in terms of what the options are to join us online. That would be fantastic. Thank you, Christina.
Okay, so I'll go next. I'm sort of waiting for the prompt. There's some very exciting news that we have released the survey for our research project for ePortfolio practice and labour in Australia and New Zealand. So there's already been a similar research survey in Canada and the United States. And now we've actually launched for people who are involved in portfolios in all different ways. If it touches your professional life, we'd love to hear from you about what you actually do, how what you've been able to achieve, what's difficult, and particularly about how much labour and effort you put into that. So it's one of the principles of the task force, visibility of labour, and that's the connection with this here. So you'll see there's a QR code. If you want to click onto that, you can go straight to the survey, or I think Alison's put the link in the chat. This is the first time that we're actually advertised it. It will be open for quite a while, and I'm sure that we'll be advertising it again, but please, we'd love to hear from you if you're in Australian and New Zealand ePortfolio practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And please also pass the link on to all of your colleagues at your own institution or also other institutions so that we get their responses. Now, if you'd like to hear more from the panelists or want to get in touch with them or have some feedback and want to send that to me, you have our email addresses here on the slide. And of course, you can also connect with the three organizations, ePortfolios Australia, ABLE, and ePortfolio Ireland. We put social media in here, as well as for ePortfolios Australia and ABLE, how you can get the newsletter and automatically receive news on a very regular basis from our organizations to stay in touch with all things portfolio related. And so I'd like to hand back to Alison for the last word.
So thank you, Christina, for moderating. Christina, there was something in the chat around how do people find out about future webinars. So obviously you've got the list of people and so you'll keep people informed ideally of future webinars if they're not already on an e-list somewhere else. So thank you very much to the three organisations that have come together. It does take a bit of time to pull these sorts of workshops together. It's like a good, dinner party, hours and hours of preparation, an hour of discussion, eating, and then lots of dishes to be done. Maybe we just don't have so many dishes coming up. So thank you for everybody who's helped us organise the session in the first place. And then also to Christine and Leanne and Kevin, who are obviously leaders in lots of different ways, but certainly have taken a lead in their thinking and some of their practice around the use of artificial intelligence or ChatGPT type of activities within education in general, but certainly how that might impact ePortfolio practice. I can see in the chat that has actually created a lot of interest and a lot of discussion there. So we do have a few more ideas coming up through Menti. So if you've got any more, please let Christina know or myself know if there's any other ideas you'd like for future webinars. So if you haven't already done so, please use either the reactions or the chat to give all of our the moderator and the three panelists your appreciation of their input and time. And thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you in some of the future webinars that we run.